I define toughness as the quality of not giving up or not giving in to something difficult, and how well you can continue to function while you're enduring it. It opens up more possibilities for your life. If there's something physical or psychological that's hard to do, most people just won't do it or they'll give up. But if you have the power to not give up and to go further, whatever the goal is, it means you can have successes that most other people can't have. Welcome to the Ageless Warrior Lab. I'm BJJ Black Belt and Dirty Dozen member Dave Meyer, here to draw wisdom from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the martial arts and explore how it applies to success in business, relationships, your long-term health, and making the most out of your life. Has being tough ever helped you in your life? Do you wish you were tougher? Think for a second, who is the toughest person you know? And when I ask you who's the toughest person you know, does your mind immediately jump to physical toughness? Are you thinking about someone who's strong and a good fighter? What about someone who has a tough job physically, like a roofer or a construction worker? Or a tough job psychologically, like a paramedic or an ER doctor who has to see really terrible things and still keep it together? What is toughness? And is it good? And how can you foster it in yourself? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, newsflash, I think toughness is generally a good thing, but I don't think it's an end in itself. It's a trait, or it's a tool that can be developed that can be really useful. But it is possible to be too tough for your own good, and we will talk about that too. So today in our lesson from the lab, we're going to do 4 things. 1, we're going to define toughness and the different ways that you can be tough. 2, we're going to look at why toughness is useful. 3, we're going to look at the negative consequences of being too tough. And 4, we're going to talk about how to develop and increase toughness in yourself. So, number 1, let's define toughness. Now, I'm sure we agree that there are different kinds of toughness. There's body toughness, right? Being resistant to physical pain and able to keep going. So you can get hit in the face or be knocked off your feet and just keep going because your body's tough. And we certainly see that in the martial arts. Most people think of this as toughness. It's physical, and physical toughness can absolutely be useful. And then there's the kind of mental toughness that pairs with physical toughness. So you might be knocked off your feet and actually be totally all right physically, but you might not feel all right mentally. That's like a child who falls down and who's physically fine, but who keeps crying because they don't realize they're okay. So you want to have a body that's physically tough and a mind that understands that. Having this physical and mental toughness can really come in handy in those times where that kind of toughness is needed. That might be a fight on the street or some natural disaster where you're injured and you need to do what's needed to get yourself and your family to safety. But then there's pure psychological toughness. That's the ability to endure a bad situation and just press on. That's like the first responder who can walk into what would, for most people, be a horrifying situation, maybe a car crash with someone screaming in pain, and just keep composure and do what has to be done. And then there are first responders that need to combine physical and psychological toughness. I'm thinking here, for example, firefighters who got to both crash through doors and carry hundreds of pounds of equipment into places that are dangerous, but then also deal with the human trauma of an injured or screaming child or something like that, for example. But there's also a different kind of psychological toughness. Think of a woman who survives and leaves a physically or emotionally abusive relationship, takes her kids with her to some shelter, and then has to rebuild her life and work 2 or even 3 jobs to keep her kids healthy and on track. That is its own kind of amazing toughness and resilience. So physical toughness involves pain tolerance and fatigue resistance, and psychological toughness involves emotional regulation under pressure and anxiety control. Or another way to think about it is that there's acute toughness, which is usually physical, and it's something that's needed in short bursts. And then there's long-term toughness, which is usually more mental, like being able to endure a difficult situation for a long period of time and just keep functioning. Now, while the physical form of toughness can be useful, and I've certainly spent a lot of my life developing that, I actually think it's the psychological toughness that can be more important to help you live a better life, and I will get back to that. But going back to having a single definition, I think the trait of toughness, whether that's psychological or physical, I'd say is not just the ability to endure something hard, but I define toughness as the quality of not giving up or not giving in to something difficult and how well you can continue to function while you're enduring it. So, the ability to stay effective under physical or mental stress, to stay emotionally regulated and goal directed, and you just don't give in. Now, the second thing we want to look at is why is toughness useful? But before we go any further, I just want to make one thing clear. Being tough physically, so being able to endure pain or endure exposure to the elements or even just prolonged physical discomfort like an endurance runner, or being tough psychologically, to be able to deal with really hard situations and not give up or not panic. All of that's great, but it doesn't somehow make you better than someone else. What I mean by that is you don't know what pain or suffering, physical or psychological, feels like to another person. You are not in their body or in their head. So I might brag that I can take a high degree of physical pain while other people can't, but maybe I just don't feel pain the same way other people do. Maybe my nerves aren't as sensitive. So what would be excruciating for someone else just isn't that bad for me. Or maybe I can endure psychological suffering better than someone else because it just doesn't affect me that much. Maybe because of how my brain works. The point I'm trying to make is we can't make a value judgment about someone else just because they don't appear tough to us. We don't know what it's like to be in their head. We don't know what battles they're fighting internally. And this is especially true psychologically. Some of the absolutely toughest people I know have experienced PTSD or anxiety issues, and that might make them appear weak to the outside. But believe me when I tell you, if you experienced what they're experiencing, it would bring you to your knees, no matter how tough you think you are. So let's just agree there's no judgment going on here. But that said, if you can be tough or get tougher mentally or physically, that can help you live a better life. Now, it's worth mentioning that while we're talking about being tough, sometimes, especially when it comes to physical toughness, just looking tough might be good enough. I've said on this podcast that peace and power are close friends. And what I mean by that is being powerful can help discourage people from trying to harm you in the first place. And so it makes it easier to maintain the peace. So just seeming powerful may be all you need to keep the peace. That's a big part of being a bodyguard or a bouncer. Yeah, you may need to actually get physical at some point, but just looking really big and imposing can often ward off problems at the bar or at the concert. Simply looking tough can help keep you out of trouble. But fundamentally, what I care about is not about looking tough, it's about being tough. And remember, how tough you think you are can get you into trouble, but how tough you actually are can save you. So narrow the gap between the two. Now, toughness exists in how you respond to something. The toughest people aren't the ones who feel the least. They're the ones who stay effective anyway, physically or psychologically. It's less about how much you can tolerate without suffering and more about how well you can still execute regardless of what you're experiencing. Now, why can toughness be good? Well, part of that's obvious, but not all of it. Obviously, if you're in a physical fight, being tough is important. You have to assume that whoever attacks you is more ready than you are, and they may get in the first shot. And yes, I'm assuming here that you're not the person who's attacking somebody else. So you have to be able to absorb an attack you didn't plan on and may not have been ready for. Shake it off, whatever just hit you, and get your engine running and body in gear. That takes experience, training, and toughness. Also, there's toughness needed to just do the daily physical training to get physically tough in the first place. The way I look at it, the bad guys are working out hard, and we need to work out harder. As a symbol of that, I try to always do some sort of super hard training or workout on New Year's Day when most people are just lounging around. Symbolically, this reminds me I am starting the year ahead of the competition. But what's not obvious about the benefits of toughness is it opens up more possibilities for your life. And what I mean by that is if there's something physical or psychological that's hard to do or hard to persist through to the end, most people just won't do it or they'll give up. But if you have the power to not give up and to go further, whatever the goal is then becomes available to you in a way that it's not available to a less tough person. Physically, that could mean you get to see the view from a mountaintop that most other people just can't make it up to. And for mental or psychological toughness, it means you can have successes that most other people can't have. A research paper called Systematic Review Mental Toughness Across Domains, published in 2017 in Frontiers for Psychology, showed that mental toughness is consistently associated with more positive outcomes. So, better learning and academic work performance, and higher life satisfaction, and lower cases of depression, and better coping strategies, and things like that. For example, successful founders of companies are more likely to have failed before. It takes a certain amount of mental toughness to decide to even start a company in the first place, let alone start another one if you've already failed the first time. But those failed founders are likely to have learned a lot from their failures. So resilience and toughness can be a key differentiator between someone who is professionally successful and somebody who isn't. In building my nonprofit, there were so many extremely difficult times, long periods of time with no money to pay myself or my staff, super difficult people I needed to deal with, challenges left and right. And when we made the decision to sell adoptabet.com, it took a year of stressful work to finally close the deal. And that deal easily could have broken down at any point. And it took a toll on me mentally. It took a lot of toughness. I could go on and on about stressful things I've had to push through to make great things happen in my life. And I'm sure you have examples in your life as well. So toughness can save you, and it can also expand what you can achieve. And in that way, toughness is, I think, a good thing. But the third thing for us to look at is, when can being too tough actually be a bad thing? Going back to what I said about how your ability to endure pain, possibly better than other people, might just be because your nerves are less sensitive. If you have no sensitivity, you'd be super tough, but you might not realize you're actually getting injured. And to some degree, this is a problem that serious athletes face. We ignore signals that our body are sending us. We're so focused that we just want to push through it. And often pushing through the pain is exactly what's needed to train hard and win, right? That's toughness. And we said that that's a good thing. But sometimes if we push too much or too often, we get injured. And that could be an injury that happens in a moment where we just didn't listen to the pain and back off it. Or it could be a long-term problem that we just kept ignoring until it got so bad that now it can't easily be fixed. If you're a serious athlete, you know what I mean. There are times I end up in a doctor's office with some issue that's gotten so bad I finally needed to address it. And the doctor asks, well, when did this problem start? And I swear I can't even remember because I've been enduring it for so long. And now it's not an easy thing to fix. And that problem of pushing through too much until it becomes a problem isn't just a physical issue. Frequently, someone keeps enduring some mental pain or bad situation that someone who's less tough would have gotten themselves out of a long time ago. My friend, Sensei Dave Kovar, put it like this: you need to discipline your discipline. And I love that. Your discipline should work for you to help you push through things and achieve more, but not against you to keep you going when you really should have stopped. And key to that is knowing the difference between pain and injury, right? Pain is a signal that doesn't always have to mean stop. It might just be the discomfort you have to go through to learn how to endure and to get stronger. But injury is the enemy. And once you get used to being physically challenged, you learn what you're capable of absorbing. And then you can better calibrate if something is just painful and hard, or if it's leading to injury and you should back off. Here's a good rule. Use your toughness when continuing on moves you forward. Use restraint when continuing on is going to make things worse. You want to possess the toughness, physical and mental, to push through about anything, but you also need to listen to your body and listen to your heart and your brain, sometimes other people, and understand if you want to engage that toughness or if it isn't actually better for you to just give up and move on to something else, right? To live to fight another day. And remember, strength is built on a foundation of care. At some point, you need to put back what you take out. So if you're going to push yourself really hard, physically or psychologically, at some point you need to be sure that you repair any damage and put something back in the bank. Physically, that can mean massage or just rest. And psychologically, that means taking a vacation now and again, or even getting with a good therapist. So if we agree that being tough, when deployed correctly, is good, with the caveat that you don't want to use your toughness to push too far into something that might in the end be harmful to you. The fourth thing we want to discuss is what you can do to develop and increase your toughness in all its forms. Now, whatever the type of toughness we're talking about, some people are just born tougher than others. You can see that in how some kids can tolerate things better than other kids. That might be their ability to tolerate physical challenges or mental challenges. But toughness can for sure be learned. You can see how people who grew up in a place with more hardships, physical or mental, or people who just had more hardships in their life, can in the end become tougher. I have the sense, and I don't know if you agree, that people from history, people in the past, were just tougher because they just had to deal with a lot more hardships than we do in modern day society. Now, that may or may not be true, but I think it's important as we develop more creature comforts and more of us are sitting around and not necessarily threatened or having to deal with the things that ancient peoples or even people 150 or 250 years ago had to deal with. It's important that we maintain our toughness. I want to call it our martial integrity, our ability to do heroic things, even if that's not required for most of us on a daily basis. So, the way to foster toughness, not surprisingly, is to seek out tough experiences. As my friend and great jiu-jitsu champion David Mitchell says, it's good to seek out and do hard things. This builds your tolerance to hardship and also teaches you that you can survive it, which right there makes it easier to endure it in the future. Knowing that you've been through something before, or even better, knowing that you've been through something worse before, can make it much easier to endure a bad thing now. I remember when Royce Gracie was interviewed about his wins in the first UFCs, and he frequently said that his fights in the octagon were easier on him than his preparation training with his brother Rickson. And if you are in some really hard situation, but you know you've experienced worse, that can really help you physically and mentally. So let's talk about how to get tougher physically. Well, one great way to do that is to get out and train martial arts. Could be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or kickboxing or any martial art that's really hard for you. The goal is to push yourself to do something hard, to get used to being really worn out, and to a reasonable degree, get used to being roughed up or even, hit with gloves. Or you could take on a particularly challenging sport like mountain biking or something like that. For me, my toughness is the product of hard training in the martial arts over my lifetime, put on me by teachers who all had my best interest at heart. When I trained Kung Fu during my high school years, my instructor, Sifu Douglas Wong, used to take us through drills specifically to train our toughness. He'd have us stand facing another student, and we'd take turns slapping each other in the face, light at first, but then harder and harder. Now, we associate slaps with, I don't know, something that isn't that violent. But an open-handed slap to your face where you just stand and take it can really sting. And it can also leave some pretty interesting hand-shaped bruises on your cheek that you have to explain the next day. But that exercise got us used to not only the sting of the pain, but in keeping your eyes open and not cowering when you know the slap was coming. So it was also a good focus exercise. Doug would also have students take sticks and swing at our opponent's legs and shoulders and torso. Also, while they just stood there and took it. Again, light at first, but then harder and harder. We were hitting the muscles, so we weren't injuring the person, but man, could that hurt. We also stood in front of each other and did an exercise where we would swing our arms at each other in a specific pattern to make the insides and outsides of our forearms, just past our wrist, clash bone on bone. And we would start light and then do it harder and harder and harder. Now, lots of hard styles of martial arts do body conditioning exercises like that against poles or against stiff pads or with other people, all to physically and mentally toughen yourself. The key is it needs to hurt, but not injure you. And of course, toughness in the martial arts comes in other ways too. Our classes at the Machado schools where I trained were really hard. But then always when they ended, each person in the class would have to call out an exercise that the whole class would have to do to their count for 30 seconds. So you'd have 30 panting and exhausting people standing in a circle, each one calling out an exercise, trying to be tougher than the one the last guy called out. And that could be squat jumps or one-arm push-ups or just anything. And if anyone stopped, Higgin would make the 30 seconds start over again for everyone. I remember one time where Higgins started a class by tearing up a piece of paper with numbers he had written and handing each piece with a number to the students. And he told us to remember our number and then put the number in a hat that he then passed around. He said he'd pick one number, and whoever number he picked would have to do back-to-back 5-minute matches with each of the other, I don't know, 20 or so people in class. So around 100 minutes of nonstop training with totally fresh opponents coming in every 5 minutes. I remember my number was 15, and wouldn't you know it, my number got picked. And Higgin was particularly evil, not letting me get warmed up with the lower belt people first, who I was clearly better than. No, he sent the best people against me at the start. So my first matches were me getting punished and absolutely exhausted as person after person who was better than me and fresh kept coming in. And about 25 minutes in, I finally started to get the people I could normally beat, but they were fresh and I was just so tired I couldn't dominate them. But at some point, I was, I don't know, so tired that I felt my technique just taking over, and I got into some sort of a zone and started to dominate the rest of my matches, even though I was really beyond exhausted. That experience truly upped my game and it built my toughness. And for years, I kept that little piece of paper with the number 15 written on it in my wallet as a reminder of what I'd been through and how that adversity made me tougher. So to get physically tougher, put yourself into ever tougher situations and just practice not giving in, with the caveat that in order to avoid injury, when needed, discipline your discipline. Now let's talk about how to get tougher psychologically. As I said, your physical toughness is a great skill to have if you're ever in a true physical challenge, but mental toughness, psychological toughness is what can help you every day and in every situation. Now, the good news is as you develop your physical toughness, you're likely developing some mental toughness too, right? You're getting used to discomfort, and it's your mental toughness that tells you not to give in. But it's that mental toughness specifically we want to focus on now. So I've mentioned in these podcasts my first jiu-jitsu instructor, Sensei Jack Seki. He was a small man in stature, but to me, especially as a little kid, he just seemed like this giant, scary, invincible guy. And class would always start on time. And if you were even a moment late, you might at best be told you had to do push-ups as a punishment, and at worst be told you needed to sit out the entire class. Seki was very big on respect, and coming to a class late was disrespecting the teacher and disrespecting the other students. So one day it was time to start the class, and Sensei Seki just wasn't there. I'd never seen this happen, and everyone was confused and not sure what to do. And after a few minutes, the senior black belt assistant instructor, a guy named Sensei Skip Kepke, called us to line up, and he started the class. And about 15 minutes into the class, Sensei Seki came through the door walking really slowly. We stopped the class, and Sensei Kepke asked if Seki was okay, and Seki pointed to his foot, which was wrapped up in this white towel and was bloody. And he said that he was walking to class from his house, and he stepped on a nail that went through his foot. So he had to take his shoe off and wrap his foot in a towel that he happened to have in his pack and walk more slowly. And he apologized that that made him late to the class. Right? So he's apologizing to all of us for being 15 minutes late because of a nail that went through his foot. And then he wouldn't let anyone take him to the hospital until he finished teaching the class. Now, this was mental toughness, and it made an impression on me, especially as a little kid. Forgetting about tetanus for a minute, Seki had an amazing calmness and control, and he showed us the strength of his mind and his will, and that memory stays with me until today. So, short of having our foot punctured by nails, how do we train our mental toughness? There was a study of Swiss military officer cadets in 2022 where they did a relatively brief, just a psychological skills-based resilience intervention that then showed benefits for the cadets in their cognitive and emotional and problem-solving skills and recovery during actual operations. So psychological toughness can be taught. There are sports that are tough physically, but also require mental toughness to endure hardship. Being a triathlete, like my wife, who completed an Ironman triathlon, which is a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a marathon, a 26.2-mile run. certainly can develop toughness and the ability to endure suffering. But for those of us who, like me, are not likely to be doing an Ironman triathlon anytime soon or ever, let's start with how you do your daily exercise. I think exercise should tax you and be an ordeal because you're not just working out your muscles and your tendons, you are training your spirit and toughness. Now, any exercise at any level is great for your health, but if you want to make yourself mentally tougher, don't miss the chance to turn exercise into a bit of an ordeal. In high school, I ran cross country, and the races were at a local agricultural college that had these trails in the surrounding hills. It was a 3.5 mile race, but the last part of the race had the steepest, toughest hill that dropped you behind this forested area where then you would just round the hill to the final sprint to the finish line. And that last hill was called Puke's Peak. And it was called that for a reason. It wasn't unusual to get over it and see people doubled over on the backside of it who just couldn't keep running the short distance around to the finish line because they were just tossing their cookies. And it was during running up that last hill of those races that I first started saying a phrase in my head that stays with me even to today. When I feel exhausted and I just feel I cannot do any more, I say to myself, when the body says no, the mind says go. When the body says no, the mind says go. Don't let your mind say no unless there is a danger of injury. Now, for your normal daily exercise, having a personal trainer helps if you can afford it. Someone else to tell you what to do if they know you really want to be pushed. A trainer can keep you honest, not just in watching your form, but they can keep you from taking it easy on yourself. They can push you beyond what you'd push yourself to do, but they need to be skillful and they need to understand your goals and your limits. I'm super fortunate to have as my strength and fitness coach, Levon McCormack, who is also an amazing BJJ black belt and MMA fighter. So he really understands the challenges my body faces and my goals. I think I'm a pretty tough guy, but I don't think I've had a single session with him where at least once in the session, I don't ask myself, why am I subjecting myself to this torture? And here are a few other hints for easily developing mental toughness in the gym. First of all, just stay moving. Don't sit down and certainly don't zone out between sets. Do supersets, which means pairing exercises for different muscles so you're resting from one exercise as you're doing another and you're going back and forth. And this keeps you in motion with less downtime. If an exercise involves lying down, like a bench press, or sitting, like a leg extension, then between sets, get up and don't just stay there lying down. Now, you should take what time is needed between the sets to recover, but I'm just saying stay in motion and stay standing and stay sharp. Don't pamper yourself by just sitting down and lying down, and certainly don't start looking at your phone. Now, one of the most basic ways to develop mental toughness through exercise is just to keep going when you feel exhausted. Remember, when the body says no, the mind says go. Do that extra set or that extra lap or that extra few sprints. Or set up for yourself a really tough rotation of high intensity exercises, each working something different so you're not working the same muscles each time. So one station could be squat jumps, which is just legs. The next could be lat pulls, which is arms. The next could be lunges with weights or something, which is just legs. And you get it. It could be in the gym or it could be at home, but pick exercises you can do at a high rate for, say, 30 seconds, then rest for 15 seconds, then start the next exercise for 30 seconds. I do this with a rotation of usually 6 different stations and 10 total rounds, with the only rests being the 15 seconds between the 30-second high-intensity sets. So it takes about 40 minutes for me, and it is a physical and mental ordeal. It is just exhausting. I use a Tabata app to measure the time for rest time and for work time. And I always get comments from other people in the gym of how hard my workout looks. That ability to keep exercising, stay moving, keep training when you're exhausted really matters. That is direct practice in what we agreed toughness is, the ability to face a challenge and not give up. So do an exercise routine now and again that makes you want to give up, but don't give up. If you're training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when the free training starts at the end of class, don't sit out or rest any rounds. And ideally, keep doing more rounds until the instructor says everyone has to get off the mat. So be the last person to stop training. And even as you do your rounds, Don't stop until the clock beeps and tells you the round is over, and then start each round the moment the clock beats again. In fact, if you found your next partner and you're both waiting for the clock to start the round, stop waiting and start training. Never let the clock make you train less. The clock only makes you train more. You want to practice keeping going even when you think you can't. When the body says no, the mind says go. And there are other easy ways to develop your mental toughness. In your daily life, if you bump your head or stub your toe, train yourself to not immediately say, ow, and just breathe deeply and keep your focus. As I mentioned in a recent episode 30, actually, on street confrontations, having the ability to endure pain but remain focused is really important. And then there's cold showers. The health benefits of cold showers, and even better, cold baths or cold plunges, are well documented. It can help you lose unneeded weight. It can reduce joint swelling and can put you in a better mood, but it can also develop your toughness. So finish all your showers with absolute cold water for like a minute or more and get into that cold plunge. And again, shut up and just tolerate it. You're building toughness. If you're walking into a building or going through an airport, don't take the elevator or escalator. Even if you're carrying luggage, just take the stairs. Why miss a chance to exercise? And this just continues to develop your mental toughness. Now, sure, but what if you have to go up to the 20th floor? Well, what do you think I'm going to say? I can sum up these little actions in 4 easy words. Don't be a wimp. Seriously, train yourself to not take the easy path. Take every chance you can to develop your strength and your discipline. And here's some more ideas. Go backpacking, not car camping or glamping, but take a few days and get yourself a pack and provisions and go for a real backpacking trip with some friends. Now, a lot of people do this for fun, and it is fun, but it also takes some toughness. You've got to strap everything onto your back, hike for miles, deal with the elements, sleep on the ground. It all builds up your resilience, especially if you choose a difficult hike, maybe at high elevation on rocky terrain with long distances to cover each day, and go when it's a bit colder. Now, I can tell you with all the modern tech in backpacking these days, backpacking is definitely more comfortable than it was when I was younger. Everything is lighter to carry and all that stuff. So don't totally pamper yourself, Be willing to rough it a bit. Maybe just take the basics and not the latest high-tech comfort gear like an inflatable solar hot tub or something like that. I'm making that up, but I wouldn't be surprised if that exists. And how about a multi-day fast? Don't eat anything for a while, just be hungry. Intermittent fasting each day is popular and does have some health benefits, but I'm talking about a well-planned multi-day fast, like 5 days or more. Done right, that can toughen you up and also have some big health benefits. But I'm emphasizing here, it has to be done right. By which I mean something like a broth or juice fast, where you have plenty of water and some basic nutrients and just no solids. I'm suggesting it now not just for the health benefits, but because not eating for 5 or more days is tough. And it's a good way for you to build your mental strength and practice enduring some discomfort. I'll link to some resources for safe fasting in the show notes. Now, here's a toughness builder that's going to surprise you. I'm a big fan of massage, especially massage where the massage therapist is slowly, deeply penetrating to loosen your muscles in places and angles that you just can't reach on your own by laying on a lacrosse ball or whatever. I'm talking about deep tissue massage, but I mean really deep tissue massage. So what does this have to do with toughness? I'm glad you asked. There's a style of massage that was developed by Professor Henry Sashiro Okazaki, who also developed and taught Danzanryu Jiu-jitsu in Hawaii in the 1920s through the 1940s. When I was taught this, it was called Okazaki Long Life Massage, and I was fortunate to learn it from the late Professor Sig Kufroth in California. This style of massage leans heavily on the use of elbows, pun intended, because the therapist is using the point of the elbow and leaning down into you and really, really holding it in. It really hurts, but it feels fantastic afterwards. But while it's happening, you've just got to tolerate it and breathe through the pain. Okazaki started the Nikko Sanatorium of Restoration Massage in Honolulu, where he did these treatments for the public. And his son Hashiro operated it for decades afterwards, but I'm not sure if it's still there today. I went there a bunch of years ago. I was referred by Bernice J. and got a treatment from Hachiro. But I ignored Bernice's advice to not mention I was a jiu-jitsu black belt. The style of massage is super deep already, but if Hachiro knows that you're a black belt, it meant you could take the pain better, so he pulled out all the stops. And let me tell you, friends, that was one massage where you will not fall asleep on the table. Now, I give that style just as an example, but if you can find someone who does slowly and truly deep tissue massage, and that could be Rolfing or trigger point therapy or shiatsu or maybe some Thai massage, all of these can be really good for your body. But while they're happening, they can really, really hurt. And you just have to relax and suck it up. And that's just another chance to teach yourself to calmly tolerate pain and not give in. Unless, of course, you think the person is going so deep that they're actually going to injure you, and then you absolutely should speak up. Now, what about non-physical ways to develop psychological toughness? Well, life tends to hand you those, right? A divorce, a bad boss or a coworker, just any situation where even as you work to make it better, you just need to endure the hardship to just tough it out. Now, I don't think you should seek those situations out, but there are ways to put yourself into hard mental situations. As I mentioned, being a first responder or someone whose work puts them into really tough psychological situations will make you mentally tougher. But if that's not your profession, you can volunteer like my brother does on a suicide hotline. This is a wonderful thing to do for other people, and that's the main reason to do it. But it will put you into some difficult situations that will help toughen you up, or at least give you some good perspective. Or you can put yourself in other situations that you find hard. If you're shy speaking in front of groups, join a group like Toastmasters and just force yourself to do it. Or if you practice a sport, sign up for a competition if there is one. That can be really tough for most people, but it really benefits you. Check out my podcast episode about competition. It's episode 20. So just look for ways to put yourself in situations that are tough so you can exercise your toughness. It's weird because generally we avoid tough situations, which normally makes sense. But it's those tough situations that make you tougher. And if you're in a tough situation now, remember this is going to make you stronger. In episode 3 of this podcast, I talked about transforming pain and bad experiences into something positive. We can be like a samurai sword forged in red hot heat, pounded and folded and pounded and folded again and again to remove the impurities that makes it really strong. Hard experiences make you stronger and more adaptable. Remember, if you're going through something really tough right now that's not of your own choosing, obstacles strengthen you. And what seems like a bad thing now, in the end, can be a good thing. You don't have all the information. Maybe for you right now, it's just time to grow, and that growth will make you tougher. So moving forward, here's a plan to make yourself tougher, both physically and mentally. I'm going to divide these into levels, and you can train these. Level 1, discomfort. That would be just the daily things like cold showers, never using an elevator, and those kinds of things. Level 2 is controlled adversity, hard gym workouts that push you beyond where you feel like stopping, or martial arts training that tests your limits and toughens you up that way. And then level 3, real stakes. Go into competitions. Put yourself on the line in real world situations, like speaking in front of a group if that's really tough for you. Be willing to have tough conversations or volunteer on the suicide hotline and just be willing to put yourself into uncomfortable situations. Every week, be sure you're doing something from one of these 3 levels that challenges your body and that challenges you psychologically. Take a few minutes now to figure out what those might be and then just commit to doing them. I'll leave you with this. Life is going to test you. That part's not optional. What's optional is whether you are ready. So this week, do the hard thing because toughness isn't something you have. It's something you practice. It's a tool. It's an attribute for you to deploy when you need it. It expands your options, but it's not everything. Toughness helps you pass the tests, but wisdom helps you learn the lessons. We'll talk more about that in future episodes. I hope you found this useful. Do leave a comment on the YouTube channel and tell me your thoughts. I read and respond to all comments. I really do. You can also like and share this. And if you're watching on Apple or Spotify, please give the show an honest rating there. I'll be back next week with more lessons from the lab. And until then, keep developing your strength, your wisdom, and go out and do good in the world.